Picture this. It is 4:30 in the morning. The sky is still dark. The stars are still out. Most people in the city of Benin are still sleeping, wrapped in their blankets, dreaming sweet dreams. But not this woman. She is already awake. She is already on her knees, not to pray, not yet, but to check the worn-out tire of a yellow and green Keke, a tricycle parked just outside a tiny, crumbling one-room apartment. She presses the tire with her thumb the way a mechanic would. Her hands are rough. Her fingers are cracked from years of gripping that handlebar in the hot sun, in the rain, in the dust of the market roads. Her name is Adaeze. She is 43 years old, and she is about to do what she has done every single day for the past 7 years, climb into that Keke, fire the engine, and drive from sunrise to sunset, not for herself, but for 5 little girls sleeping inside that room behind her. 5 daughters. No husband. No help. Nothing but this machine, these roads, and a mother's love that refuses, absolutely refuses, to die. But tonight is different. Tonight, something has happened that has broken Adaeze in a way she has never been broken before. You see, just 3 hours ago, she received a phone call. A phone call that made her drop her phone on the floor. A phone call that made her slide down the wall of her kitchen until she was sitting on the cold, dirty tiles, pressing both hands over her mouth so her daughters sleeping in the next room would not hear her scream. The voice on the other end of that phone? It was Emeka, her husband. The man who walked out of this house 7 years ago and never looked back. The man who told her, with his own mouth, standing right there in that same doorway, that she and her daughters were a burden he was no longer willing to carry. That man called tonight. And what he said will shake you to your bones. But before we get there, before we find out what Emeka said on that phone call and why it sent Adaeze to her knees, we need to go back. We need to go all the way back to the beginning because this story did not start with a phone call. This story started with a wedding, a dream, and a lie that took years to fully reveal itself.
So settle in.
Because this is not just a story about suffering. This is a story about what a mother can do when the whole world turns its back on her. And trust me, you are not ready for where this story goes. Where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments right now. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that subscribe button. This channel needs your support to keep bringing you stories like this one. Adaeze Okonkwo was born in a small town called Agbor in Delta State, Nigeria. She was the second of 4 children. Her father was a primary school teacher, a quiet, gentle man who smelled like chalk and old books. Her mother sold akara by the roadside every morning before the sun got too hot. They were not rich, but they were happy. They were the kind of family where nobody went to bed angry, where her father would gather all the children on the veranda at night and tell them stories under the stars. Adaeze grew up believing that love was real, that family was forever, that if you were a good person, good things would find you. She was wrong, but she didn't know that yet. When Adaeze was 22, she met Emeka Okafor at a friend's birthday party in Warri. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with a smile that took up his whole face. He sold building materials and drove a second-hand Toyota Camry that he had polished until it shone like a mirror. He spoke with confidence. He laughed with his whole chest. He told Adaeze on the very first night they met that she was the most beautiful woman in the room. Adaeze laughed it off. She was not the type to fall for sweet words. But Emeka was persistent. He called every day. He visited her family in Agbor. He brought her father a carton of malt drinks and sat with him on the veranda for 2 hours, talking about football and politics and the state of Nigerian roads. Her father liked him. Her mother liked him even more. That boy has good manners, her mother said. He knows how to respect elders. Within a year, Emeka proposed. Within 2 years, they were married. The wedding was small but beautiful. White and gold decorations. A live band that played high-life music until midnight. Adaeze wore a cream-colored gown with lace sleeves, and when she walked down the aisle and saw Emeka standing there with tears in his eyes, she thought, "This is it. This is the life I was made for." She had no idea what was coming. The first year of marriage was good. Emeka's business was growing. They rented a 2-bedroom flat in Benin City. Adaeze got a job as a sales girl in a pharmacy. Life was not perfect, but it was moving forward. It was building. Then Adaeze got pregnant. And everything shifted. She gave birth to a baby girl. They named her Chisholm. Emeka held the baby for exactly 4 minutes. Then he handed her back, went outside, and made a phone call that Adaeze was not supposed to hear. But she heard it anyway, lying there in the hospital bed, still weak and trembling from the delivery, her ears sharp the way a new mother's ears always are. "It's a girl," she heard Emeka say into the phone. His voice was low, flat, like someone reading a grocery list. "Yes. A girl. I know." There was a pause. "I said I know," he said again. Then he hung up. Adaeze told herself she was imagining things. She was tired. She was hormonal. New mothers have strange thoughts. She pulled little Chisholm closer to her chest and breathed in the smell of her baby's head and told herself everything was fine. But it wasn't fine. It was the beginning of the end. Her eyes went a little more cold, a little more distant, like each daughter was not a blessing but a punishment, like the universe was doing something to him personally. Their names were Chisholm, Ogochi, Adana, and Keke, and the last one, the baby, Obiageli, though everyone called her Obi. 5 names. 5 faces. 5 reasons Adaeze woke up every morning. But to Emeka, they were 5 disappointments. See, Emeka Okafor was a man who had grown up hearing one thing from his father. A man without a son has nothing. His father said it at the dinner table. His uncles said it at family gatherings. It was not even said as a cruel thing. It was said the way you say the sky is blue, like it was just a simple, obvious fact of life. And Emeka had believed it. With his whole heart, he believed it. So, with every daughter Adaeze gave him, he didn't see a child. He saw a failure. And slowly, silently, he began to look for somewhere else to place his hope. That somewhere else had a name. Her name was Bose. Bose was Emeka's ex-girlfriend from before he met Adaeze. They had dated for 3 years in their 20s before breaking up over what Emeka described as irreconcilable differences. What he never told Adaeze, not once, not ever, was that Bose had been pregnant when they broke up. That she had given birth to a son. Emeka's son. A boy named Tobe, who is now 7 years old and living with his mother in Lagos. Adaeze did not know Tobe existed. She did not know Bose existed. She had no idea. The year Obi was born, the 5th daughter, was the year Emeka's visits home became shorter and shorter. He was traveling for business more often. He stopped eating Adaeze's food. He stopped sleeping in the same room. He would come home late, shower, and sleep in the parlor, claiming the bedroom was too hot. Adaeze was not stupid. She asked questions. She checked his phone when she could. She prayed. She cried. She confronted him twice, and both times he told her she was imagining things and always looking for trouble. The 3rd time she confronted him, he did not deny it. He sat across from her at the kitchen table, looked her in the eye, and said with a calmness that was more terrifying than anger, "Adaeze, I have a son. His name is Tobe. His mother is Bose. I have been supporting them for years, and I am going back to them. I am done here." The room went silent. Not the peaceful kind of silent. The kind of silent where the air itself seems to disappear. Where your ears ring and your vision blurs and your brain keeps saying no, 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 even as your heart already understands that yes, 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 this is real. "What about your daughters?" Adaeze whispered. Emeka stood up from the table. "You'll manage," he said. And he walked out the door. He came back one more time, 3 days later, while Adaeze was at work. He collected his clothes, his electronics, the small generator they had bought together, and the one thing that truly broke Adaeze when she found out. He took the N87,000 she had been saving in an envelope under the mattress. 7 years of small, small savings. Gone. He left behind 5 daughters, a torn mattress, 2 months of unpaid rent, and a woman who had to decide, in the span of one night, whether she would survive or disappear. Adaeze sat in that empty room surrounded by her 5 sleeping girls, and she cried until she had nothing left. Then she washed her face. And she made a decision. The decision came to her through the most unexpected person, a woman named Mama Uju. Mama Uju was Adeeze's neighbor, a big, loud, generous woman in her 50s who wore colorful wrappers and always smelled like palm oil and fresh pepper. She had known Adaeze since they moved into the compound, and she had watched Emeka's absence grow over the months like a slow-spreading stain. When she found Adaeze 3 days after Emeka left, sitting on the doorstep at 6 in the morning, red-eyed, not knowing what to do next, Mama Uju did not ask questions. She sat down beside her, took Adeeze's hand in both of hers and waited. Then Adaeze told her everything. When she finished, Mama Uju was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Come with me." She took Adeeze 2 streets away, to a dusty open space where a man named Baba Ralph kept 4 Keke tricycles for commercial hire. Baba Ralph was Mama Uju's cousin. He was a short, wiry man with a gap in his front teeth and kind eyes. "She needs work," Mama Uju told him simply. "Real work." Baba Ralph looked at Adeeze for a long moment. Then he said, "Can you drive?" Adeeze had never driven a Keke in her life, but she said, "I can learn." Baba Ralph smiled the gap-toothed smile. "Good enough," he said. Learning to drive the Keke nearly killed her. Not literally, but the first week was humiliating in a way that Adeeze had never experienced before. She stalled the engine on steep roads. She misjudged corners and scraped walls. One afternoon, she accelerated when she meant to brake and drove the front wheel into a shallow gutter while 3 passengers shouted at her from behind. The market women laughed. The other Keke drivers, all men, laughed louder. "Woman, go back to your kitchen," one of them shouted. Adeeze gripped the handlebar and did not respond. She went home that evening with N450 in her pocket, 2 skin knuckles, and a deep bruise forming on her left thigh where she had bumped against the gearshift. Chisholm, her oldest daughter, 10 years old at the time, wise beyond her years, was waiting by the door. She took one look at her mother's hands, and her eyes filled with tears. "Mama, does it hurt?" Adeeze smiled. Not even a little. It was the first lie she told her daughters. It would not be the last. By the 3rd month, Adeeze knew every road in their part of Benin City, the way she knew the lines on her own hand. She knew which roads flooded in the rain, and which ones stayed smooth. She knew which hours the traffic was lightest, which bus stops had the longest queues, which market days brought the most passengers. She woke up at 4:30 every morning. She made PAP or EBA for her daughters before they woke up, packed their school bags, checked their uniforms, braided Obi's hair because Obi was only 3 and couldn't manage without her. She dropped the older ones at school by 7:15, then drove straight to the road and didn't stop until the last passenger of the night had reached their destination. She came home at 9 p.m. most nights. Sometimes 10. She ate whatever was left in the pot. Sometimes nothing. She would just drink water and go to bed. She counted her money every night by torchlight, dividing it into little heaps. School fees, rent, food, kerosene, medical. There was never enough. But there was always something. And something, Adeeze had learned, was enough to keep going. The insults came from every direction. From the other Keke drivers who saw her as an intruder in a man's world, who blocked her from the best loading points, who spread rumors that she had done diabolical things to succeed. From neighbors who whispered that a woman driving Keke was a disgrace. From her own family, her mother-in-law especially, Emeka's mother, who called one afternoon and told Adeeze directly, "You should have given him a son. This is what you brought on yourself." Adeeze held the phone against her ear and listened to every word. Then she said quietly, "My daughters will make you ashamed of what you just said. Goodbye, Mama." And she hung up. But the hardest moments were not the insults. The hardest moments were the nights when one of the girls was sick and there was no money for medicine. The night Keke developed a fever, so high her whole body shook and Adeeze had to beg Mama Uju for N2000 to buy drugs. The morning she went to start the Keke and found the engine dead, and sat there in the darkness, forehead pressed against the handlebar, shaking silently because if the Keke didn't run, they didn't eat. The morning Chisholm came home from school with a letter from the headmistress saying that if the remaining school fees for all 5 girls were not paid within 2 weeks, they would be sent home. The amount? N47,000. Adaeze had N8000. That night, she sat on the floor of her room with the letter in her lap. The girls were asleep. The compound was quiet. And for the first time in years, truly for the first time, she thought, I cannot do this. She pressed both hands flat on the cold floor. She sat like that for 20 minutes. Then she stood up, went to the kitchen, and started counting the small items she could sell. The old blender, the iron, the extra school sandals that Adaeze had outgrown, her own silver earrings that Emeka had bought her on their first wedding anniversary, the only jewelry she still had. She sold all of it. She raised N19,000. She drove an extra 3 hours every day for 2 weeks, skipping lunch, going to roads she normally avoided because they were farther away. By the end of 2 weeks, she had N48,500. She walked into that school office, placed the money on the desk, and looked the headmistress in the eye. All 5 of them, she said, paid in full. Months passed, then years. The girls grew. Chisholm, the oldest, was sharp as a razor, the kind of student who came first in her class without seeming to try. Adaeze was quieter, but had a tenderness for people, always bringing home stray cats and injured birds. Adaeze was the loud one, the fighter, the one who once marched to a teacher's office alone to report that her classmate was being bullied. And Keke was musical. She would tap rhythms on the table while reading, her fingers always moving. And little Obi, the last one, the baby, was the one who watched everything with big, serious eyes and remembered every single word anyone ever said to her. 5 different girls. 5 different souls. All of them held together by one woman in a Keke. By the time Chisholm entered secondary school, something had shifted in the compound. The neighbors who used to whisper about Adaeze had gone quiet. The Keke drivers who mocked her had slowly, begrudgingly, given her space at the loading points. Baba Ralph, watching how she had turned that one Keke into steady income, offered her the chance to take a second one on hire purchase. You have proved yourself, he told her. Nobody in this area works harder than you. Adaeze took the second Keke. She hired a young man to drive it while she drove the first. Small. Steady. Forward. She was not where she wanted to be, but she was not where she started. And the girls, they were everything. Every school report, every position, every first in class, or most improved, felt like a coin going into a jar. Like proof. Like evidence that all the pain had a purpose. 7 years after Emeka walked out, on a cold Harmattan night in December, Adaeze's phone rang. She was in her room, tired from the road, half asleep. She saw the number and froze. She hadn't seen that number in 4 years. Her thumb hovered over the screen. She answered. Adaeze. His voice. The same voice. Slightly older. Slightly rougher. But unmistakably his. It's me. It's Emeka. She didn't speak. I need to talk to you, he said. Something has happened. Something. I don't know how to say this. His voice cracked. And Emeka Okafor, the man who walked out without looking back, began to cry. Not a small cry. A broken, ugly, desperate cry. The kind of cry that tells you that whatever has happened to this person, it has reached all the way down into the deepest part of them, and pulled something loose. Adaeze sat up in the dark. Her heart was pounding. What happened, she said. Her voice came out steady, even though her hands were not. And then Emeka told her. And Adaeze's whole world, again, turned on its head. The phone was still pressed against Adaeze's ear. The room was completely dark. The only sound was the distant bark of a dog somewhere in the compound, the low hum of a generator 3 houses away, and the breathing of a man on the other end of a phone line, a man who was falling apart in real time. Adaeze had not moved. She was sitting upright on her mattress, one hand gripping the phone so tightly her knuckles had gone stiff, the other hand pressed flat against her own chest as if she was trying to hold her heartbeat steady by force. Emeka was still crying. Not the polished, controlled kind of crying that men sometimes do when they want sympathy. This was something rawer, uglier. The kind of crying that happens when a person has held something terrible inside for too long, and the weight of it has finally cracked them open. Emeka. Adaeze's voice was low, careful, like she was speaking to someone standing on the edge of something dangerous. Stop crying and talk to me. What happened? A long pause. The sound of him trying to breathe. Then, Tobe is gone. Adaeze blinked. What do you mean gone? Another pause. Longer this time. He died, Adaeze. His voice broke completely on the last word, splitting it in half like a piece of dry wood. My son. He died. 3 weeks ago. Road accident. He was in a bus coming from school, and a trailer lost control on the Lagos-Ibadan expressway, and he stopped. He could not finish the sentence. And Adaeze sat in the dark with that information settling around her like dust after an explosion. Slowly, quietly, covering everything. A 14-year-old boy. Dead. The boy Emeka had left her and her daughters for. The boy who was supposed to be his legacy, his pride, his reason for everything he had destroyed. Gone. Just like that. In the space of one afternoon on a Nigerian expressway. Adaeze closed her eyes. She felt many things in that moment, and she would spend years afterwards trying to make sense of all of them. There was shock. There was a strange, terrible sadness, not for Emeka, but for a boy she had never met who had never done anything wrong, who had simply existed and now no longer did. There was something else too, something she was ashamed of even as she felt it. A dark, quiet voice deep inside her that whispered, You see what happens? She pushed that voice down hard. Because whatever Emeka had done to her, a dead child was not a punishment that any human being deserved. I'm sorry, she said. And she meant it. I'm truly sorry, Emeka. He let out a sound that was halfway between a sob and a laugh. You're sorry. You, of all people, are sorry for me. I am sorry for Tobe, she said clearly. He was innocent. Silence. I know, Emeka whispered. I know he was. He talked for a long time that night. Adaeze listened without interrupting, which was more than he deserved, and she knew it, and she did it anyway, because that was simply who she was. She had never been a woman who took pleasure in other people's pain, even when those people had caused her own. He told her about Lagos, about the life he had built with Bose after leaving Benin. He said it in a careful, edited way, the way people talk about their mistakes when they are ashamed but not yet fully ready to take responsibility, leaving out the worst details, smoothing the edges. But even the smoothed version was enough to give Adaeze a picture. The relationship with Bose had not been the paradise he imagined. Bose was proud and difficult and had her own way of doing things that did not always leave room for Emeka's own pride. They had fought constantly. Over money. Over parenting. Over the ghost of Adaeze. Because apparently Bose had always known about Adaeze, had always resented her existence, and had spent years trying to erase any trace of her from Emeka's life. Emeka's building materials business had struggled in Lagos. The contacts he had in Benin did not transfer. He had to start from nearly zero in a city that did not know him or care about him. He borrowed money from Bose's family to stay afloat, which meant he owed them in ways that went beyond money. And through all of it, the one thing that kept him going, the one thing he told himself made all the sacrifice and the betrayal and the destruction worth it, was Tobe, his son, the boy. And now Tobe was gone. I have nothing, Emeka said quietly. Near the end of the call, his voice had dropped to almost a whisper. Bose and I, it's finished. Her family took back everything they gave us when the business collapsed. The house is hers. The car is hers. I am sleeping in my friend's boys' quarters in Surulere. I have N12,000 in my account. A pause. 12,000 naira, Adaeze. That is all I have in this world. Adaeze stared at the ceiling in the dark. She thought about the N87,000 he had taken from under the mattress the day he left. She thought about 7 years of waking up at 4:30 in the morning. She thought about the school fees. The fever, the sold earrings, the days she went to sleep hungry so the girls could eat. She said nothing. I want to come back, Emeka said. The words came out small and ashamed, like a child admitting a terrible thing. I know I don't have the right. I know I have no right at all. But I have nowhere else to go and his voice cracked again. I want to see my daughters. Please, Adaeze. Please. The word please from Emeka Okafor's mouth. The man who had said you'll manage and walked out the door. Adaeze closed her eyes. She did not answer him that night. She said, I will call you back, and she ended the call, and she sat in the dark for a very long time. She did not sleep. By the time the sky outside her window began to lighten from black to deep blue to the pale gray of early harmattan morning, Adaeze had not closed her eyes once. She had lain on her mattress with her arms at her sides, staring at the ceiling, thinking. Not about Emeka. Not yet. About her daughters. Chisholm was 17 now. Old enough to understand everything. Old enough to have built real walls around herself when it came to the subject of her father. Not anger exactly, more like a careful, deliberate indifference, the kind of person develops when they have decided that a certain thing can no longer hurt them. Ugochi was 15 and softer, more emotional, the one who still sometimes asked questions that broke Adaeze's heart. Mama, why did Daddy not like us? Was it something we did? Adana was 13 and furious in the way only 13-year-olds can be furious, loud and absolute and certain. She had told Adaeze exactly once, if that man ever shows his face in this house, I will pour pepper soup on his head. She had meant it. Keke was 11. She barely remembered Emeka. He had left when she was 4. Her memory of him was vague and formless, more a feeling than a face. And little Obi, 10 years old, had never really known him at all. She had grown up in a world where it was simply her sisters, and her mother. Where Mama was the one who fixed things and earned things and decided things. Where the absence of a father was not a wound because it had always simply been the shape of their life. What would it do to them, any of them, to have this man walk back through the door? Adaeze lay in the dark and turned the question over and over, examining it from every angle, the way you turn a stone in your hand looking for something sharp before you pick it up properly. At 5:15, she got up. She went to the kitchen. She made tea, something she rarely did. Tea was a luxury, something for Sundays. But she needed the warmth of it in her hands today. She sat at the small kitchen table and drank it slowly, watching the light change outside the window. At 5:45, she heard the familiar sound of Chisholm's alarm going off in the next room. Chisholm was the first one up every morning, her mother's daughter in that way, at least. She appeared in the kitchen doorway 2 minutes later, school uniform halfway buttoned, twisting her hair into a quick bun. She stopped when she saw her mother sitting there at the table. You didn't sleep, Chisholm said. It was not a question. Adaeze looked at her oldest daughter, this tall, serious girl who had grown up watching her mother fight, and felt a wave of something so enormous she had to look away for a moment. Sit down, she said. Chisholm sat. Adaeze wrapped both hands around her mug and told her. She told her about the phone call, about Tobe's death, about Emeka's collapse, about the 12,000 naira, about the request to come back. She told it plainly, without drama, without editorial, just the facts laid on the table like objects. When she finished, the kitchen was quiet. Chisholm was looking at the table. Her jaw was tight. Her fingers were flat on the tabletop. What are you going to do? She asked. Her voice was perfectly controlled. I don't know yet, Adaeze said. That's why I'm telling you. Chisholm looked up then. Something flickered in her eyes, surprise, maybe, that her mother was asking. That she was being included. That after 17 years of being her mother's daughter, she was being treated for the first time like something close to an equal. He left us with nothing, Chisholm said. He took your money. He told you to manage. He never sent school fees. He never called on our birthdays. He never, she stopped. Breathed. He never chose us. Not once. I know, Adaeze said. So, why would you let him come back? Adaeze was quiet for a long moment. I didn't say I would. But you're thinking about it. A pause. I'm thinking about everything, Adaeze said carefully. That's different. She told the other girls that evening, when they were all together after dinner. All 5 of them sitting on the floor of the parlor the way they always did, a habit from when they were small that none of them had outgrown. She turned off the television. She sat in the middle of them. She told it the same way she told Chisholm.
Plain. Clear.
No dramatics. The reactions were exactly what she had expected, and also nothing like what she expected, because children always manage to surprise you even when you think you know them completely. Adaeze burst into tears. Not sad tears, confused ones. She kept saying, I don't understand, over and over, and Adaeze had to take her hands and hold them until she calmed down. Adaeze stood up and walked to the window and stood with her back to everyone, and Adaeze could see from the set of her shoulders that she was fighting something very hard. When she finally turned around, her eyes were dry, and her voice was like gravel. I don't care about him, she said. I don't care if he's suffering. I don't care if he is 12 naira or 12 million. He is nothing to me. Keke said nothing at all. She just leaned her head against Adaeze's shoulder and stayed there. And Obi, little 10-year-old Obi, the one with the big serious eyes who remembered everything, sat cross-legged on the floor looking at her mother with an expression that was too old for her face. Mama, she said, is he a good man now? Or is he still the same man? The room went quiet. Adaeze looked at her youngest daughter, and she realized, with a sudden startling clarity, that this was precisely the question she did not have the answer to. She did not call Emeka back for 2 weeks. During those 2 weeks, she drove her Keke, made her money, fed her daughters, helped with homework, braided Obi's hair, argued with Adaeze about housework, listened to Adaeze practice a song she was learning at school, watched Chisholm study at the kitchen table with the focus of someone who knew exactly what she was building toward. She lived her life. And she thought. On the 15th day, she called him back.
You can come, she said.
But not to live here. You come as a visitor. You come to face your daughters. Whatever happens after that, she paused. We will see. There was a long silence on his end.
Thank you, he said.
His voice was rough. Thank you, Adaeze. Don't thank me, she said. Thank God you still have daughters to come back to. She hung up. He arrived on a Saturday afternoon in January. Adaeze had not told the girls the exact date, only that he was coming soon. She had not wanted to give Adaeze too much time to prepare her defenses, and she had not wanted to give Adaeze too much time to hope for something that might not happen. But when a battered Sienna bus pulled up outside the compound that afternoon, and Emeka Okafor stepped out, Adaeze saw her daughters' faces before she saw anything else. And what she saw on those faces nearly broke her. Because here is the thing about children who have been abandoned. They spend years, building a version of the person who left them in their minds. A version made of anger, or of sadness, or of deliberate forgetting. A protective version. A version that keeps them safe. And then the person walks out of a bus and they are not a monster, and they are not a villain from a story. They are just a man. An ordinary middle-aged man who looks smaller than you remembered. Whose hair has gone gray at the temples. Who is holding a small bag that tells you everything you need to know about how far he has fallen. Who is standing on the road looking at 5 daughters he abandoned and trying not to collapse under the weight of what he is seeing. Emeka Okafor looked at his daughters. And the expression on his face, Adaeze had no word for it. It was not guilt exactly, though guilt was part of it. It was more like a man seeing something he had thrown away, seeing it whole and beautiful and thriving, and realizing with his whole body what he had done. Adaeze made a small sound beside Adaeze, like the beginning of a cry that she swallowed. Adaeze turned and walked back inside the house without a word. Keke stood very still. Obi stared at him with her enormous serious eyes and then said, in a voice as calm and direct as a judge, You are our father. Not a question.
Just a fact.
Being established. Emeka crouched down to her level, and this big man, this man who had once been broad and confident and had driven a polished Camry and laughed with his whole chest, this man's face broke open completely.
Yes, he said. His voice was barely a sound.
I am. You left us, Obi said. Still calm. Still a statement of fact. Yes, he said. I did.
Why?
The compound was completely silent. Even the generators seemed to pause. Even the distant market sounds faded out. Emeka opened his mouth, and for a long, long moment, no sound came out. What happened inside that house over the next 3 hours was something Adaeze would think about for the rest of her life. Emeka sat across from his daughters in the small parlor of the house he had never seen, a house Adaeze had been renting for 4 years, decorated with the girls' school certificates on the wall, their drawings, a framed photograph of all 5 of them at Chisholm's last prize-giving day, and he tried to explain himself.
He tried.
He talked about his father's voice in his head, about the pressure he had felt, about Bose and Tobe, and the terrible logic that had felt so real and so certain at the time. He did not make excuses, or rather, he tried not to, though explanations sometimes sound like excuses no matter how honestly they are offered. Chisholm listened with her arms crossed and her face unreadable. Ogochi cried quietly through most of it. Keke looked at the wall. Obi kept her eyes on his face the whole time, unblinking, like she was filing everything away. Adaeze did not come out of the bedroom. When he finished talking, the room was quiet for a very long time. Then Chisholm uncrossed her arms and leaned forward and looked her father directly in the eye. I want you to look at those certificates on the wall, she said. Emeka turned and looked. Chisholm's WAC result. First in her set. Ogochi's school prize certificate. Adaze's award for community leadership. Nkechi's music competition certificate. And a drawing Obi had made that her teacher had framed. A picture of 5 girls standing in front of a yellow Keke with a woman in the driver's seat. Under the drawing, in a child's careful handwriting, my hero. My mama. Emeka stared at the wall. That is what you left behind, Chisholm said quietly. That is what you called a burden. He didn't respond. There was nothing to say. He stayed for 2 days. He slept on a mat in the parlor. Adaeze fed him, not out of love, but because she was not capable of having someone in her house and not feeding them. It was simply not in her nature. On the second morning, Adaeze came out. She walked into the parlor where Emeka was sitting with his tea, stood in the doorway, and looked at him for a long time. He looked back at her. I used to have a fantasy, Adaeze said. Her voice was tight and controlled. When I was small, maybe 8 or 9, I used to imagine that one day you would come back and you would have a big car and a bag of money, and you would fix everything. I used to imagine that we would all go back to normal.
She paused.
I stopped having that fantasy when I was 10, because I realized that even if you came back with a big car and all the money in the world, it wouldn't give me back the nights I watched Mama come home from the road with her hands bleeding. It wouldn't give back the school mornings we had to choose which 2 of us would eat and which 3 would wait. It wouldn't give back anything. Emeka was very still. I'm not going to pour pepper soup on your head, Adaeze said. I'm past that. She looked at him one more second. But I need you to know that I see you. I see exactly who you are. And I will never call you Daddy again. She turned and walked back to her room. Emeka sat there with his tea going cold in his hands. And for the first time, watching him, this broken, hollowed-out version of the man she had married, Adaeze felt something she had not expected to feel. Not pity, not forgiveness, not love. Something quieter than all of those things. Something that felt almost like peace. Like she had been waiting, without knowing it, for him to come and see. To come and witness. To stand in the house she had built without him and look at the daughters he had underestimated and understand, truly understand, what he had thrown away.
He had seen it now.
And nothing would ever unsee it. On the morning of the 3rd day, Emeka packed his small bag. Adaeze walked him to the road. They stood outside the compound gate in the early morning air, the harmattan wind carrying dust and the smell of smoked fish from the market 2 streets over. He was going back to Lagos. His friend in Surulere. His 12,000 naira. His nothing. He turned to face her. I know I have no right to ask anything, he said. No, she agreed. You don't, but I'm asking anyway. He looked at her with eyes that had aged 20 years in the past month. Is there any way at all, that you could ever?
Don't, she said.
softly but firmly. Don't ask me that question today, Emeka. Today is not the day for that question. He nodded slowly. They stood in silence for a moment. Then he said, "You are the strongest person I have ever known." Adaeze looked at the road ahead, at the early morning traffic beginning to build, at the city waking up, at the Keke drivers taking their positions at the loading point down the street. "I know," she said simply, and she turned and walked back through the gate. She thought that was the end of it. She thought Emeka would go back to Lagos, disappear into his regret, and that life would continue exactly as it had been. Her and her girls, the Keke, the road, the slow and steady building of something that mattered. She was wrong, because 6 months later, something happened that she never, in all her years of preparation, in all her years of imagining every possible future, had seen coming. Something that would not just change her family, something that would change everything. It started with a letter that arrived on an ordinary Tuesday morning, in a white envelope with a Lagos postmark, addressed not to Adaeze, but to Chisholm. Adaeze found it on the floor just inside the front door, slipped under the gap, while Chisholm was at school. She turned it over in her hands. Her daughter's name on the front in handwriting she did not recognize. She set it on the kitchen table and stared at it for a long time. And a feeling, cold, electric, unsettling, moved through her chest. Who was writing to her 17-year-old daughter? And why had they slipped it under the door like a secret? If this story is hitting you somewhere deep, if Adaeze's strength is making you feel something real, please hit the like button right now. Leave a comment telling me, what would you have done if you were Adaeze? Would you have let Emeka come back? Share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that one person's strength can change everything. And please, subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Every subscription tells us you want more stories like this. We will see you in Chapter 3.